Gentlemen, free speech is no longer a given in Europe. What we once considered as a natural element of our existence, our birthright, is now something we once again have to battle for. To exercise free speech has become a dangerous activity. As you may know, I will be prosecuted in the Netherlands because of the short documentary Fitna that you just saw, and because of my view concerning what some call a religion of peace. On top of that, also France and Jordan are considering to prosecute me for my view in Islam, and the United Kingdom did not allow me to enter this country. And the president of Indonesia declared for TV in Indonesia that I would never be allowed again in Indonesia, to enter Indonesia as long as I live. So let me start tonight with a special thanks to the United States Border Police for letting me into this country. It feels so good being allowed entering a country once in a while. But, ladies and gentlemen, before I talk about freedom of speech, I will say a few words about Islam and Sharia law. Allow me to give you a brief introduction on Islam and Islam 101. And the first thing everybody needs to know about Islam is the importance of the Quran. As you probably know, the Quran calls for submission, for hatred, for violence, for murder, for terrorism, and for war. The Quran calls upon Muslims to kill non-Muslims. The Quran describes Jews as monkeys and pigs. And the biggest problem is that the Quran is to be considered as Allah's personal word, which orders that needs to be fulfilled regardless the place or the time. And that's the reason why the Quran is not open for any discussion or interpretation. It's valid for every Muslim and for all times. And therefore, there is not such a thing as a moderate Islam. Sure, there are a lot of moderate Muslims, I acknowledge that, but a moderate Islam does not exist. I agree with the Turkish Prime Minister for once, Mr. Erdogan, who said there is no moderate Islam. There is only one Islam, and that is the Islam of the book, the Quran. And the second important thing everybody needs to know to understand the Islam is the importance of the so-called Prophet Muhammad. His behavior is an example for all Muslims and cannot be criticized. Well, let me tell you the truth about this so-called prophet anyway. Muhammad indeed was a warlord. He was a conqueror. He was a pedophile. And he was a mass murderer. Islamic traditions tells us how he married and consumed the young girl Aisha before she reached the age of 10 years old. How he fought in battles, how he murdered his enemies, how he slaughtered the Jewish tribe of Banu Qurayza. And for millions of Muslims, the Quran and the life of Muhammad are not ancient history, but are an inspiration. And if you criticize either the Quran or the Prophet or Islam as such, you better be prepared to face the consequences. You will receive death threats from all over the world. You will be taken to court all over the world. Your national flag will be burned, and your embassies might be set on fire. Your country could face economical boycotts, and the political leaders of your own country, your own home country, will not support you, but appease Muslims and Muslim governments. Join them in their politically correct outrage and label you as a radical and a xenophobe. When criticism in Europe today becomes unpleasant, freedom of speech has to take another lane. Ladies and gentlemen, let no one fool you that Islam is a religion. Sure, it has a God, Allah. It has a holy book, the Quran. It has temples, mosques, and even a hereafter. And if you murder enough Jews, you can even get 72 versions. But in essence, in its core essence, Islam is a political ideology. Islam is a totalitarian ideology. It's a system that lays down detailed rules for society and the life of every man and woman. Islam, in fact, wants to dictate every aspect of life and society and prohibits individual, political, and religious rights and freedoms. Islam is not compatible with our Western civilization or democracy, nor will it ever be, because Islam does not want to coexist. It wants to submit and set the entire agenda. Islam means submission from Muslims over non-Muslims, kafirs, like you and me. So there cannot be any mistake about its goal. The end goal of Islam for all time is to dominate. To dominate, and once again, to dominate and establish a world rule of Islam. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that is the reason why Winston Churchill compared the Quran to Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf, as the famous writer Oriana Fallaci did. And why the brave psychiatrist, Dr. Wafa Sultan, I'm so proud that you're here today, man. Really, I'm so proud. That the brave Wafa Sultan rightfully said, and I quote her all the time, about the clash between the West and the Islam, that it's a clash between civilization and backwardness, between the civilized and the primitive, between rationality and barbarity. The current Islamization of Europe is not an invasion like those we have seen in the past. This time, it's not a military invasion with swords. This time, we have to deal with a stealth invasion. Nowadays, the armies are replaced by cultural relativism, by demography, and by mass immigration. It is this dangerous cocktail that is the main cause of the Islamization and is responsible for the introduction of Sharia law in Europe. As you know, Sharia is Islamic law, effective in barbaric countries like Saudi Arabia and the Islamic Republic of Iran. Beheadings, hangings, chopping off hands and feet, stoning to death, lashings, it all happens because Sharia law prescribes it. Now, radical Muslims want to implement Sharia law into our Western societies. And they are, unfortunately, very successful in doing so, helped by the Western cultural relativists, the useful idiots, as former Soviet leader Vladimir Lenin described the unknowingly who helped his cause. In my favorite country, Britain, Sharia courts are now officially part of the legal system. A lot of people don't know that. Very few people are aware of that. They have been empowered to adjudicate on financial disputes, on divorces, and on domestic violence. And there are many more examples of the rising of Sharia in Europe today. Halal food is served in many schools and universities. More women every day are forced to wear the burqa or the niqab. Islamic banks are mushrooming, and polygamy, female genital mutilation, honor killings, and Muslim men who refuse to shake hands with women are all part of 2009 Europe. And a few weeks ago, a British Muslim leader told his version of Britain under Sharia law. And according to the British Evening Standard, Anjem Choudary wants a pure Islamic state with Sharia law in Britain. He said that he would like to see the flag of Allah flying over Downing Street. Ladies and gentlemen, this would mean the end of our precious liberties, even though with Gordon Brown in office, one might not see easily the difference. Sharia. Sharia means the end of our hard-won freedom. For Sharia denies the equality of men and women and Muslims and non-Muslims. It does not allow Muslims to leave Islam. Renegades, apostates should be killed according to Islam. Sharia advocates slavery and does not recognize democracy. As a matter of fact, Sharia is exactly the opposite of democracy. And unfortunately, among European Muslims, the support for this creeping Sharia law is indeed